It's super likely that the Vikings take D-line at some point on draft weekend, but what exactly are they going to be looking for? Let's start to deep dive this position on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who listen to this show each and every day. My hashtag everydayers, I appreciate you all so very much. You guys make this show go. If you're new here, hello. Welcome. You can find this show by just searching out Locked On Vikings wherever you find your favorite podcasts, whether it is a podcast listening app like SiriusXM or even YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Welcome to D-Line Mode here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. If you are not interested in learning about some defensive linemen and about that position, guess what? You've come to the wrong place, because that's what we are going to be doing for a while now. And I think a good place to start. Okay, here's the goal, I guess. My goal, I went into this offseason woefully undereducated, I guess, on defensive line. I know what a rip move is, I understand the basics, but the nuances and the details that, will separate one guy from another didn't feel like I had a great base of knowledge. And that's all the Locked On Vikings is at this point, honestly, is I don't feel like I know enough about a thing, and then I learn about it and I think it's cool and I share it with you. Hopefully you enjoy that. So my goal here is to get that base of knowledge, to be able to understand what I'm looking at, to be able to look at a given rep and say, this is what happened on it. This is what, somebody did well, what somebody did poorly and all that. I have done kind of vaguely the same thing in the middle of the season last year, sort of in the summer, for offensive line. And it ended up generating some really, really cool insights at Ingram and like the whole interior of the Vikings and all that stuff. So I figured going to the other side and now being able to understand that matchup really well, that's my goal here. And it's also kind of my goal for you. I want you, especially if you are an everydayer and you listen to this show every single day, by the end of we'll say next week, I want to have brain dumped enough so that you feel like you have that grasp on that detail too. I want you to feel, wow, I really get D-line, right? And let's go on this journey together. So a place to start there are a few players that I've watched. A couple of these I've already done Patreon videos on, by the way, if you go to patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL, so I can show you what I'm talking about with actual game film. That is probably the best place to go, but in lieu of that, there are three, I guess, comparisons of prospects to each other that I'm going to make that sort of demonstrate some of the things that I've learned so far. So I figure that's a good place to start. So what we're going to do today is we'll talk about just pure raw size when it comes to D-line versus technique. And I think a great place to look there is the Texas interior with T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, both players who are probably going to be drafted. I say probably because T'Vondre Sweat got in trouble. He got that DWI. I don't know. Sometimes teams can get wonky about that, but it only takes one. I still think he'll probably get taken at some point. And then when it comes to quickness and power, the sort of finesse rusher versus power rusher, if you want to use Madden terms for it, I think a great place to look would be somebody like McKinley Jackson out of Texas A&M versus Jordan Jefferson out of LSU, and sort of the differences there. And I'll talk about those two players. And then the idea of the pass rush guy and the run defense guy and kind of where those two things contrast. And again, we're going to look kind of in the day three type guys with Dwayne Carter from Duke and Joan Briggs out of Cincinnati. So if you're interested in those guys. Okay, so that's sorry for all the prefacing, but this is prefacing a week's worth of podcasts. So Good luck. Okay, so starting with Texas, this size versus technique thing. So if you are uninitiated in these Texas guys, here's what we're working with. We got T'Vondre Sweat, looking like I'll call him, he was like a round 3 guy, and then he got in trouble, so that might sink. But that kind of round 3, I would have called him more of a round 4 type guy. 360-pound nose tackle. Just a gigantor human, and he moves pretty well. So very much is the, let's go be the immovable huge guy, but you can also like slash him across a gap. When I say slash, I mean you're lining up in one gap, but you're attacking another gap. So your first step is actually like lateral, and then you get up, upfield. They actually do want a little bit of depth with that first slashing step, but you're trying to cross the offensive lineman's face. Something you'll hear a lot if you're watching like clinics or you're just listening to coaches talk. You got to cross that guy's face, and if you have your whole D-line crossing from one gap to the next, you just changed every O-lineman's assignment and you just made it hard for them to communicate and figure you out. It can screw up run plays and stuff. It's a nice thing to kind of work into your plans, into your defensive game plans as part of play calls. So when you see T'Vondre Sweat doing that, you see agility. Like, he can move for a big guy. So that's kind of the thesis of him. And then the thesis of Byron Murphy, who is like very likely to be a first rounder. I would be very shocked if he wasn't a first rounder at somewhere, is, smaller, quicker, technique guy, penetrator, gets into the backfield all the time, extraordinarily disruptive, really superstar player. But he's smaller. He's 300 pounds. And the kicker is that he played at nose tackle and T'Vondre Sweat played at their like 4-eye. Imagine, we had the small guy at the Harrison Phillips position and the really huge guy at the Dean Lowry position. That's kind of weird, right? What's up with that? So I did a Patreon video on this where I can kind of show you what I'm talking about with both of these guys. But essentially the answer is the guy you wouldn't expect is better at taking on double teams. And I actually think the prowess versus double teams is what separates Byron Murphy from the myriad of kind of pass rush, smaller D tackle types that you get every single year that are, day 2 guys. They're going, oh, he's rotational or whatever. He can take on a double team. He's an every down player. Think about on neutral downs, right? Where you can run. Well, if they're going to run, someone in the interior is getting doubled, right? Double teams are for the biggest guy on the field. So you got to be able to hold up on that. And if doubling you is the best way for them to run, then you're just not going to get on the field on downs when they could run. And you're going to try to take that advantage away from the offense by just rotating it that way. And guess what? Now you're a third down pass rush specialist, and you're probably going to play, what does that mean? Like a quarter of the plays? How many plays are actually third downs? And that means that you can't be more than a day 3 pick if you're just never going to play that much because you can't hold on to a double. So the fact that Byron Murphy can means that all of that explosiveness and that pass rush and all that other stuff that he does is something you have access to all the time. Pretty sick stuff. So the thing that he does that makes him good against these doubles is this thing where he'll drop to a knee. I had heard of this described to me, but never by a name until I saw Brandon Thorne talk about it as the corkscrew technique. So we'll go with that. Sure. But it's the drop to a knee thing. You can see this with other smaller D tackles all over. And the logic is pretty cool. But teaching it is really hard and learning it is really hard. So guys that are good at it and have that skill set, kind of rare. Basically, if you're standing up and you're smaller, you're going to get blown up. But if you're on a knee, friction is now your friend, and you just got a lot heavier just by the more force required to move you, right? Because now there's friction. So dropping to a knee to accept that initial contact when that double first gets up to you is really great. But think about the way that modern run games work. And this is why you have to have some O-line knowledge. The way that modern run games work is you don't just get doubled. Duo, you kind of do. But even in duo, you've got guys climbing up to linebackers, right? Somebody is coming off of you to go handle a linebacker. And to be honest, if neither of them do, and that linebacker is clean, you probably did your job. So if you want to feel that that contact coming and you understand that that guy's not going to sustain on you, he's eventually going to leave and go up to a linebacker, then you got to drop to a knee for a second, get down, and then you got to get back up, which is kind of the downside, is that, you're not quite as maneuverable, right? You've got to get up. But if you can get down and up quickly, you can mitigate that issue and essentially just become a lot better at accepting contact from two big giant dudes. That's really useful. And Byron Murphy is excellent at it. And what's funny is when you see T'Vondre Sweat get doubled for as much bigger as he is, you'll see a guard, hand on his hip, shovel him away, move him. And if I were playing against Texas, I would probably want to double T'Vondre Sweat when he's on the field. I would say you double him, we can run on that. If you double Byron Murphy, that's not going to be as successful. So T'Vondre Sweat, big guy, can move a little bit, can even pass rush a little bit one-on-one versus guards, but doesn't hold up to the double, which sort of removes the thesis of what that big guy is supposed to even be for, which is why he wasn't going to be a first-round pick, even though he's a particularly unique and special athlete for being as athletic as he is, for as big as he is. But obviously all that is out the window now that he got a DWI. So that's just some quick thoughts on size, but what about actual power, muscle versus finesse? Let's get into that next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's number one sportsbook. It's the best place to get your gamble on. It is playoff time. Timberwolves in the playoffs, or clinched, jockeying for that 1 seed, right? So we're getting there. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 whether you win or you lose or whatever. So what are you waiting for? Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and you can make your first bet an automatic win of $150, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Whether you're betting on 3-point props or goal props or assists or whatever it is, or just parlays, spreads, over-unders, all the classics. Whatever it is, you can find it at FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you're done here, go to the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube page and check out their 24/7 live stream. If you are watching on YouTube, it'll actually just kick you right over right at the end. You don't have to press a button, but otherwise go look it up. Go find 24/7 Minnesota Sports on loop all the time, assaulting your ears just like you want. But anyways, let's move on to a couple more D tackles. So the next thing I want to talk about is like quickness versus power. And in particular, the idea of like explosiveness and a get off versus just straight up muscle. That is, I think, the things that will separate a guy like McKinley Jackson at Texas A&M from Jordan Jefferson from LSU. And Jordan Jefferson, his get off's not bad, but McKinley Jackson, his get off is I would say the main strength that I noticed when I watched him. So when I say get off, I mean like we're getting off the ball, right? This is the first step. And one of the interesting things that I see a lot when I see like people making draft videos and stuff, one of the biggest mistakes that I see is not differentiating between a timed snap count, or I'll see this on TV all the time. Oh my God, Chris Collinsworth, you need to find Jesus. And ask him about his get off, because when they time the snap, they'll get off the ball fast. But that is a super different skill from just being an explosive athlete. Like at Michigan, this was Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson's timed snap counts all the time. Now, he also had a good get off, but it seemed superhuman because he would be off the ball so fast. And all you ever see when you watch it on TV is, the lineman will get out of his stance and then it'll like pause before anybody else moves, and you see how far he got. Now, here's the deal. Timing snap counts, still a very good skill. Very much a marketable thing that can be good for projecting D-linemen moving forward, but it's not necessarily like a sign of athleticism. You've got to see reps where they didn't time the snap count, look at their explosiveness there, and judge them on that. And there are definitely people that'll trick you, that love to time the snap, Figure out the snap cadence, get off the ball really fast, win reps that way. You don't give those wins back, right? Those sacks, those pressures, they all count. But if we're projecting, I would much rather see somebody who is just naturally reacting and getting off the ball fast without knowing the snap cadence at all. And if they can time it up, then that's even better. But I would much rather see that explosiveness. With McKinley Jackson, he has quick hands and he has a very explosive looking get off. So you can see the way that he sets up his stance and the way that a D-line stance is supposed to be. One thing that I like to look for, and it's tough with a stance because everybody's body is different. So there isn't, like, there's a textbook way to do things. This is definitely true of quarterback too. There's a textbook way to do things. And there are guys that won't do things textbook, and that can be fine just because of the way that their human body is constructed. They just need to do it different. Where their center of gravity is, how long their legs are versus how long their arms are, all of that stuff. But typically, the way that you get the most explosive stance as a D lineman is, I'm thinking like 4-point stance here. So both hands in the dirt, right? But if you want 3 hands in the dirt, you just take one off. It's kind of the same gig. But you want your hands to be in line with your feet. So if your feet are set up, shoulder width apart, your hands should be shoulder width apart too, or whatever it is, right? Now, again, some people are different. Some people like to have a little bit of a wider stance or whatever because they want to go laterally better, or that's just how they're balanced. But that's probably a little less explosive than it would be, right? Like that's the textbook way to do things. And I think looking for textbook, and if it is different and it's working, then that might tell you something about like, oh, okay, so he's got this kind of flexibility, or he's just this kind of body type, or maybe this is the nature of his strength and stuff. But you can see like the quickness of the get off is different from the power of the get off. And this is where McKinley Jackson kind of loses me, is sometimes he will just break on a lineman, like water on a rock, just totally stopped up. And that shouldn't happen if you're getting off of the ball explosively. You should be getting off the ball with some kind of force. An O-lineman shouldn't be able to just stop you up. But that sort of belies a lack of power, a lack of it's just a muscle thing. It's just that guy's out-muscling you, right? And then you go to the combine, and this is where you can use the combine results to kind of say, okay, it looks to me like he's playing a little bit with not that much strength, right? But there's no strength meter over his head that I can look at, right? Like I can't tell this is exactly what I'm looking at. And hey, look, I'm like kind of new to stuff like this. So maybe I'm just wrong too. This is a good way to confirm what we're looking at. What you're looking for is the jumps, right? It's like the vertical jump. Bad vertical jump. So you go, okay, so those are the same muscles that he's using, and they just aren't as powerful as his peers, right? Okay, so we get that. So we have this guy that has the ability to be quick and the quick hands and stuff like that. Like McKinley Jackson, he'll get drafted on this quickness and this like finesse kind of thing, and he even gets proper leverage on the guy. He'll be low. He'll have his posture proper and stuff like that. Drives his feet. Everything you want to see, just making no progress. So when you see it and it looks like pretty good to you, but he's not making any progress, you're going, okay, that might be an issue of athleticism. Compare that to Jordan Jefferson, who is a bigger guy. Get off's okay. It's fine. But you see the knockback and you see that the power is paired to it. And like, I guess this is more of a how to uncover strength comparison, how to tell who is strong and who isn't when you're just kind of watching two strong guys push on each other, right? And how to figure that out without having to know and memorize every offensive lineman and all of their combine stats and all of their recruiting drill stats and all that stuff. Like, you probably don't have that information encyclopedia memorized, and so the way to tell is, are there times when he's not in the place where he wants to be, but still winning just via muscle, right? And there's reps like that with Jordan Jefferson where, with everybody, this happens to everybody. You get leveraged, right? Or, somebody got off low on you, you got off the ball slow that rep, whatever, like this happens. And I like to see those because I like to see how do you turn that into a win, or do you just get smoked, right? And you can see this with Johnny Newton, who I just released a Patreon video about in particular. You can see that sort of recovery ability. When it does happen, he's going to be able to still shed that. He's going to be able to kind of like recover his balance and do some kind of move, or he just has the strength and the muscle to say, yeah, you got leverage on me, but I'm still going to get the win on you. And you can really see that. But with Jordan Jefferson, you can see that quickness. You can see an okay get off, but crucially, you see the power. That means that he can take those skills and turn them into actual wins. You can walk somebody back into the quarterback's lap, that kind of thing. And with Jordan Jefferson in particular, he was one of those guys that wasn't necessarily supposed to penetrate all the time. Even in like pass rush times, you just kind of want to place yourself such that neither of the linemen blocking you can go away and help with anything else. So you can just be a 2-for-1, and taking that positioning and maintaining that positioning is also skillful. Like, offensive linemen don't want to be in a 2-for-1. That's bad numbers for the offense, right? That means you're playing 10-on-9 the rest of the field. So typically one of those guys is going to want to sort of push you off to his teammate and go find other work, go find somewhere else to help, figure out where the blitzer is or something like that, right? And especially if you're running a blitz and you know that there's a linebacker coming up, that if this guard comes off of me and takes that linebacker, our blitz just didn't work, right? So being able to resist that push from the side and just having the power, the stoutness, keeping your feet moving, and just having that immovability that you want in a D tackle is also skillful, and also sort of you can see the power, especially because that's typically not going to be a favorable angle for you. The O-line gets to pick how they engage with you, and then they're going to be able to pick whatever angle they think is good. And if they still can't move you, yeah, you're probably a pretty strong dude. So I like Jordan Jefferson a lot. I'm not a huge fan of McKinley Jackson. Like I see the vision, but I don't love putting non-powerful guys on the D-line, and I do kind of think that there's an issue there with him. But there's one more that I want to go over. We're going a little bit deeper into day 3 here with Dwayne Carter and Jawan Briggs. I'll talk about it later. Next. Okay, moving on. So the pass and the run, obviously different kinds of game, different skills, different coaching points, totally different stuff, right? And Dwayne Carter, in my opinion at least, and I don't think I'm on particularly unpopular ground, is very much a pass rush specialist of a defensive lineman. I think he's D tackle. He is absolutely pass rush guy. And when you see him against run plays, and I think he's going to be the kind of guy that goes, in day 3 because he is a pass rush specialist. Because when you would run the ball against Duke, and he had to, be in the fit, you could see a lot of mental mistakes that sort of, again, you have to like psychoanalyze a little bit, which is the most dangerous part of all this, but I do think it's a necessary evil. And this is the part where you have like the best chance to be wrong. So be very careful, and very humble about it. Right. But I don't think you can get a complete evaluation without at least trying here. So there'll be plays where his eyes just totally lose the ball. Especially, look, this dude plays in the ACC. The ACC is like extreme. I mean, all of college, but very read option heavy. Tons of read option teams in the ACC. And so that means your eyes have to be really disciplined in the run. And this is why I don't think that he is a good enough run defender to be like if there weren't passing in the NFL, like if this were the the 1920s and I don't think this dude's draftable. Thankfully there's not, and therefore he is, but like that's how bad it is. Because his eyes just get lost on him, right? His eyes will go to a puller where they're not supposed to. So when you get into the run fit, right? Whatever gap you're supposed to be in or whatever you're supposed to do, once you're there and you've kind of established your position, your eyes, and essentially your eyes need to snap to the ball right after the snap, like while you're getting yourself in position. Your eyes need to be on the mesh point. It needs to be on the quarterback and the running back or the wide receiver going on a jet sweep or whatever fancy crap the offense is doing. Your eyes need to be there, and they need to be watching it, and they need to be trying to locate the ball, right? Now, a lot of run defense against option-heavy teams will kind of have you take the quarterback, you take the running back, you take the pitch, like you take this, I'll take that kind of situation so that you don't have to guess. But either way, your eyes still need to be on that mesh. And if your job is the QB and the QB, runs out, let's say he hands it, but he runs out like he has the ball, right? You still got to chase him. So you still have to watch that situation happen, and you just got to act like the QB has the ball because that's your job. But you also, there's an awareness thing to being how long does it take you to realize that the quarterback doesn't have the ball, and you can now actually abandon that and go pursue and rally to where the ball is, even though you don't really have a gap there, right? Go over there and make a problem as fast as you can. At least put a clock on things before reinforcements arrive. Be the reinforcements. And so if your eyes are bad, you can't do any of that. And Dwayne Carter will just get lost, and you will see him struggle. You can literally see him looking around, he will struggle to find the ball, and then before you know it, the ball is past you, and you do not have time to do that in the run game, right? How fast does a run play develop? Everybody takes their 2 steps and engages, and then the gaps are the gaps, and the running back, all he has to do is take 1 step to get the ball, and now he's hitting a gap, right? We aren't measuring time in seconds. We are measuring time in steps when it comes to the run game. And so by step 2 or 3, that the die is cast. The running back, if he's good, has chosen where he's going to go, and now things have developed and they're about to go. So you do not have time to sit there for a step or two and go, where's the ball? That thing is going to be past you. That said, he is a strong player, so when it is, he has to hold up to a down block or something like that, he can do that. But really, what I liked about him the most was in the past, where he was explosive with his get off. He was strong. He had all of that, and had some pretty cool pass rush moves and stuff. But it was always in the pass. He could go bull rush, a pass protecting O-lineman that's playing a different technique. Against the run, not quite as useful. Compare that to somebody like Jawan Briggs out of Cincinnati. And I would say this about the whole Cincinnati defense, honestly. Guess what? The Cincinnati Bearcats had a well-coached defense. What do you know? But he's still has that good get off, that good lateral get off. He can slant that slash like what I talked about. And he's got the strength. The knockback is something I'm looking for a lot in defensive linemen. So when I say knockback, you can kind of tell who is winning the leverage battle and the strength battle, like those two things at once, in whose shoulder pads get moved when those two players collide. Because it's not often going to be both of them. One guy is going to have his shoulder pads moved up, and then he's going to have to reset and recover and get back down. And you can absolutely win a rep from there, but you're playing from behind now. And one guy is going to have his his leverage proper. And when you're looking at leverage with a D-lineman, if you think about this is architecture one or engineering 101, right? Like a flat, any support beam in anything you would build. It's at what angle? It's at a 45-degree angle, right? Because that's the best way to accept force, and the best that can make one wooden beam a lot stronger than it would be if you were just trying to hold things up by, stacking them on top of each other, right? That's just physics. So you'll see one person has that leverage battle, one is at that 45-degree angle with everything, right? And you can see power coming from the hips, from the knees. And then one other person is going to be, back is going to be bananaed out, and they're going to have their shoulder pads get shocked and stuff like that. That guy's losing the rep. And sometimes you will see the guy who is losing the leverage battle winning the rep because he's just so strong that it doesn't matter, right? If I had perfect leverage on Brian O'Neill, I'm not moving him, right? It's the power, the athleticism still matters. But you can kind of see that with Briggs and with Carter. They're both good at that. But what you see with Briggs is that he does see what's going on. He has disciplined eyes. Once he is in that position where he's supposed to be, whatever the play is, eyes on the mesh point, very disciplined, and then rally in pursuit and show me that hustle. That's also part of it, right? It's very easy, especially for the big boys, for the nose tackles to, once the play is outside the numbers, to just kind of jog it. And honestly, I kind of think that that's fine, especially in the pros. Like if you're Harrison Phillips, yeah, dude, manage your fatigue. Like don't get winded just making a point. Totally get it. But when you see college players that do that hustle, it's hard not to be endeared by it. And I love that. Okay. So hopefully I hope you learned something about D-line in this one. We're going to kind of keep going at that. I'll try to do deeper dives. I've already done sort of a deep dive episode on Chop Robinson, so I'll leave that. But I'll do like Latu. I'll do a deeper dive on Newton because I did Patreon videos on both those guys, which you can find at patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. Plus some of these day 3 guys I'm going to zip through in probably like a similar format where it's just like, here's this guy and some of the things I noticed about him. And, put him on your big board wherever you want. But that is all I got for you today. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.